Yeah, all right. And we are live on Facebook. So I want to welcome everyone to the discussion. I know last time we did one was in October, so glad to be back. Got my host with me, JeRod Lindsay. How we doing, brother Lindsay?
I'm doing great. How are you, Brother Mo?
I'm great. I'm great. And we got a special guest this evening,
Indeed.
uh, Mr. Gabe Davis. You want to introduce yourself? That'll be great.
Absolutely. What is going on? Thank you so much for having me, Maurice JeRod. It's good to be here with you all in the discussion. Gabe Davis, I'm the director for the Citizen Complaint Authority for the City of Cincinnati. I'm so excited to talk with you today about what we do at CCA and talk to you a little bit about what I've done throughout the course of my career as well. But interested in just jumping right in into the issues that we're going to be talking about. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that being said, why don't you tell us a little bit about what CCA is, right? Complaint Citizen Authority. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, what you all do, and what your role is there?
Absolutely. So the Citizen Complaint Authority is an agency. It's a government agency, but it's an independent agency that investigates citizen complaints against the police. And our jurisdiction is in the city of Cincinnati. So we investigate allegations that are made against Cincinnati police officers. And so if you have a complaint against an officer, if the complaint is that the officer mistreated you in some way, that they subjected you to excessive force, that they improperly searched you, that they improperly stopped you, that they racially profiled you, anything like that, you can bring that complaint to us. You can file that complaint through a variety of different ways, online, over the phone. We will assign a team of professional investigators to look into your case. We have the ability to bring before our investigators the officers who you're complaining about. We take statements from them. We gather all the information and evidence. Ultimately, we render a decision based on the evidence that we have. And if your allegation is well-founded, well-supported, we have a series of findings we can make. And then that information gets passed on to the city manager, the police chief. And the expectation, the hope is that we're able to influence accountability so that if we sustain somebody, for instance, for an allegation of misconduct, that finding that we render, the expectation is that we're going to be able to have a discussion about that with the police, with the city manager, and that will ultimately impact what happens with the officer, whether it be some form of training or some form of other corrective or disciplinary measures. And in cases where officers haven't done anything wrong, we come back and we say, hey, we cleared this officer, and then we have those findings that get issued as well. So we really do play that kind of a neutral role, fair investigation, a tough investigation, but we get to the bottom of what happened, and we do it on behalf of the citizens of Cincinnati. We also investigate police shootings as well. So even if no one makes a complaint about it, if there's a police shooting that occurs, whether or not the person walks away from the shooting or not, we'll go out to the scene immediately. We investigate what's happening there. We dispatch our investigators to that scene as well to ensure that everything's being handled properly and that we do our own assessment of what happened and get to the bottom of that as well. So those are the kind of things that we do. I can talk about our history, and there are other, of course, specifics that go along with that, but that's the crux of what we do and who we are.
So I think it's good to talk about the history because you all originally weren't the CCA, right? It was you all were born from something else or from another initiative. Is that accurate?
So there are a variety of other city agencies that investigated allegations against the police before CCA came about.
Okay.
We really started back during 2002 as a result of the unrest that Cincinnati saw when Timothy Thomas was shot and killed back in 2001. So, folks, I'm sure remember that there was a series of incidents, protests, riots, and over the Rhine as a result of the shooting and the killing of Timothy Thomas. And there were several other unarmed Black men that had been shot by the police in years leading up to that 2001 incident.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the city of Cincinnati was sued. Justice Department did an investigation as well. Mm-hmm. And as a result of all those things happening in the protests, the city decided to enter into the collaborative agreement. And the collaborative agreement, which everyone is, I'm sure, is very familiar with, is an agreement that did a bunch of different things. It instituted community-oriented policing in Cincinnati, but it also gave birth to the Citizen Complaint Authority and gave us the authority to do what we do. And the idea is that, the best way to ensure that there's good community police relations, that there's accountability for what law enforcement is doing, is to empower and enable citizens to play a role in investigating those allegations of misconduct, so that it's not just the police policing the police, but that citizens can be involved in that process. So our team of investigators is comprised of professionals, but we have a citizen board that reviews what we do at the end of the day and can give input in that way. And so through every step of the process, we really are an independent, citizen-driven organization that really seeks accountability through the investigation process. But we got our start back there in the 2000s as a result of what happened in 2001.
I like what you said in regards to community and police relations. What's your take on how that is in Cincinnati at the moment?
Obviously, we have some work to do. Whenever people, what we saw this past summer is that there's a lot of mistrust between communities and between police. And that's across the entire country, but that also exists here in our own backyard. We have to acknowledge that. And we have some work to do, certainly. I think we have a good department, but there's always room for improvement. And I think people expect that. People don't expect that we're just going to say, hey, we're doing better than what we're doing, 10, 20 years ago, and that we're going to rest on that. They expect you're going to be looking to continuously improve. And that really is what we're called to do, is to ensure that we're living up to those commitments, and that we're constantly looking to see where we can improve policing, where people can gain better experience in terms of how they interact in their communities, in terms of how they're treated by law enforcement as well. So, we have some work to do, but thankfully we do have some buy-in from the police department and from the city of Cincinnati into what we do. And we do collaborations and partnerships with the police in order to ensure that we are, for instance, that we're able to review not only what happens in our investigations, but if they are doing things with their policies, for instance. We try to work with them on that to have some opportunity to weigh in on what's happening with policy changes. And we also do other collaborations when it comes to community outreach and things like that. So I think that the relationship is improving, certainly. And I think we are heading, I think, in a positive direction, but we certainly can't rest on that.
No,
I'm impressed. Go ahead, Mo.
No. So let's take a step back for a second. So you've not been in your role for too long. And if I'm not mistaken, there was not as much funds going into the CAA until recently, when we had the racial unrest, racial things happening this past May, Memorial Day, time. If you could share a little bit about you coming on board and how the CCA was how it's been refunded as a result.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so when I started back in September of 2020. So I've been on the job now for roughly about 4 months. When I started, we had just sort of coming off of a period where we had been weakened by COVID-19. We had folks that had been furloughed in the office. Certainly, we had a series of years where we had not been given the full funding to hire all the staffers that we need in order to do our mission. Under the law that gives us our authority, we're supposed to have 5 investigators to do our work. In recent years, we've had as many as 2 or 3 investigators to do that work. And so it was critical when I started that we ensure that we had what we needed. Thankfully, the city council and the city came together to approve some increased funding even before I started, right before I started, in fact. And so when I came on, I had the opportunity to do some hiring to in essence, to reinvigorate some of the staffing within CCA to ensure we have what we need. And we of course you always want more, but I think we have a good group of folks right now that we can use to really move us forward and we can tackle some of the hard work that we have before us. And that was as a result of that funding, which increased our budget by, I think it was a little bit more than, or perhaps almost $300,000 of an increase from where we had been in previous years. So with a budget of close to $1 million now, I think we're able to do some things we could not do, for instance, a year ago. But like I said, there's still work to do, and certainly we're looking to see what else we can, what other resources we can tap into in order to be effective.
Perfect.
Gabe, you are a Black man, and you know how Black people typically, right, feel about the police, and you are playing a mediator role between the community and the police. Can you tell us about some of the difficulties within that role?
Yeah, it is a difficult role whenever you are in a position like I'm in, where you are having to, when you have a foot in the system, for instance, so you're a part of the system. And that's been my experience at the course of my career. I was a prosecutor first in New York City, then I was a prosecutor with the DOJ and the Civil Rights Division. So I've always kind of been somewhat in the middle of lots of debates, if you want to say that, as it relates to law enforcement and to communities of color and to Black people in America. And sort of being in those positions, you have some perspectives that are interesting, and definitely leading the CCA, I have a unique perspective now. Because I think people do have expectations that we're going to be out there, fighting for justice, fighting for accountability, ensuring that people have a fair shake and that the police are doing what they're supposed to be doing in communities of color. And so there is that desire from the community. And what we try to always do, and what I always try to do is always explain to folks what our capacities are within CCA. So what our mission is, what we are able to accomplish, what our purpose is here. And at the end of the day, we are here to give you a fair hearing, to give you a fair and thorough investigation that's going to look into what happened with your case, to leave no stone unturned, and to make recommendations that come as a result of that investigation, even if we can't, even if we don't validate that your case was one that was well-founded, because the allegation, for whatever reason, is not borne out by the facts. There still may be recommendations that we can make as a result of things we learned from your investigation that may end up improving how policing occurs in the Black community. So there are things we can still do, even if your case doesn't break the way you want it to break. And at the end of the day, we're giving you a voice in this process, and that's very important. I may not be able to wave a magic wand and to make those issues disappear, or to make folks behave how they should behave, but we can give you a voice. We can help tell your story, and we can also help to ensure that we are moving the ball ever so slightly forward when it comes to things like recommendations, and when it comes to things like just speaking the truth about the investigations and our findings. So that's kind of what I try to play. Really, it's that kind of human element, saying at the end of the day, I want to hear what you're saying to me, and I'm here to listen to your story as well, and to validate you in that perspective, that experience. And at the end of the day, I hear where you're coming from. I've been in your shoes in many respects. I'm a Black person in America, just like you are. So some of those same experiences, I certainly have had, and it's a matter of just paying folks that respect. I think it goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of story, telling the story. So Gabe, we know you're born and raised in Cincinnati. Can you tell us? Yeah, if people want to learn a little more about yourself. Tell us a little about you, how you grew up, where you grew up. When you went to school. I know Harvard. We want to talk a little bit about that. So give us a rundown, because I know you were a prosecutor. Very interested in learning more about that.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of give you just a kind of quick rundown of my biography. So I grew up here in Cincinnati, lived in Kennedy Heights for most of my life. Okay. Live in Pleasant Ridge right now, so right next door to where I grew up.
What's your favorite restaurant in Pleasant Ridge? I like the Revolution Rotisserie. Is great, man. I love it.
And that's tough. Revolution is good. Yeah. Revolution is great. I'm always a sucker for the chili, so Pleasant Ridge chili.
Oh, of course.
I'm a huge fan of.
It's got to make sure I got some cash on me.
That's right. No, but there's a lot of good restaurants in Pleasant Ridge.
Yeah.
But grew up right here in this community. Went to elementary school over at Woodford, right up the street. Yeah. My dad was a police officer in Cincinnati, so he had that experience. He retired back in 2014, but I grew up with the dad that was a cop in Cincinnati, and he patrolled the same area where we lived. He patrolled Madisonville, where he grew up. He patrolled the Kennedy Heights area, patrolled District 2, and later on in life, he also was a sergeant out of District, I believe it was District 4 and District 3 for a time as well. So that was a part of my experience. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for my early portions of my life, but later on went back to school, got her degree, and now works for the Community Action Agency, and is the Head Start program manager over there.
Ain't that something?
That's kind of
CA and CAA.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I say all that just to give you a sense for kind of where I come from, and that public service minded perspective and influence that was really imparted to me from a young age. So, I took those experiences and really that legacy of public service, and decided at an early age to become an attorney. Was inspired by Thurgood Marshall, the civil rights movement. So kind of got on that train, went to high school here, went to SCPA my freshman year, performing arts, got a scholarship to go to Seven Hills, went to Seven Hills, graduated from there, and then went on to Yale, East Coast, first person in my family to go to 4-year college. After that, came back here for a year, worked for a nonprofit in Cincinnati, in Avondale, Walnut Hills, those parts, and left again when I got into law school and went to Harvard. That's what the Harvard connection comes in, and went to law school there. And my now wife and fiance came east with me. She's a social worker, but we both went east for that experience. And And after Harvard Law School, I decided to become a prosecutor. I wanted to have the tools and have the power to be able to make a difference in people's lives. And you know, folks told me early on, hey, if you want to impact the system of criminal justice, the most powerful actor is really not the judge. It really is not the defense attorney. It really is not even the police officer in many respects. It really is the prosecutor, because they're determining, you know, how the charges are shaken out, and whether or not someone's going to get a plea or not, what the sentences are like. So I wanted to have the tools to be able to do some things. And so I became a prosecutor. And worked in New York City for 3.5 years, prosecuting anything from shoplifts up to burglaries, robberies, domestic violence cases. And then after that, worked for the Department of Justice under President Obama's administration. Started off there back in 2015 and was in the Civil Rights Division prosecuting civil rights cases. And it was just kind of like my dream job. So I was, in essence, what that means is I was prosecuting hate crimes and also law enforcement misconduct cases. So when you think about some of the more egregious incidents of law enforcement misconduct, you think about your Rodney King beatings, some of the shootings that we have seen, you know, George Floyd, things like that. You know, these are the kind of cases where we would go out and if we could prove that there was an intentional violation of somebody's rights, an intentional use of excessive force, an intentional violation, intentional deprivation of rights, we would be able to charge that person under federal law with a crime and prosecute that person in federal court. And that's what I did for 3.5 years. And then after that, you know, came back home when my wife got pregnant. So we have a 2-year-old daughter now. So we wanted to raise her closer to home. And there was, you know, change in administration once President Trump sworn in as well. So it felt like a good time for us to come back home. So we moved on back home and then settled into a law firm for a little bit here in town, Frost Brown Todd.
Yep.
Then decided I wanted to run for office because I wanted to go be a prosecutor for Hamilton County and make a difference in that arena and be able to do some of the more forward-leaning, frankly, progressive things that I thought were lacking in our justice system. And so I ran a campaign to try to do that. Came up a little bit short, but then happened upon an amazing opportunity to join the CCA and really bring a lot of that same energy and passion to that job when it comes to ensuring that there's accountability and public trust, and that there's transparency in the system. And so that's what I'm excited about doing. And I feel very fortunate to be able to work with talented folks and serve this community.
I'm glad you mentioned your campaign for Hamilton County prosecutor. Dominique, right? One of your campaign managers, right? She's a good friend of mine. And we were having a conversation. I think Mo was hosting an event where you came out and you were speaking to people, right?
Yep.
Downtown. And
That's
Dominique, right. I'm like, Dominique, what's so good about this guy? He looks young. He's already taking on Phenon. Like, what's, she said, JeRod, I told him if he wants me to work with him, come down to the West End, meet these people, shake these people's hands. She said, JeRod, I didn't think he was going to come. Like, I don't know if I would have went. Like, so she said, you came down, you were engaging, you met the people, you weren't rushing or anything. So I think for me, that speaks a lot to your character, right? When people can say those type of things about you, right? Without you being there, right? I commend that. So kudos to you for sure, man. And hopefully you will run again in the future.
Yeah. Well, we will see. But certainly, you know, Dominique was fantastic. She was a great member of our team. And I remember that day like it was yesterday down the West End. I was happy she invited me down there because it was a chance to connect with real folk and to go to an event and just listen to people, which is what I really enjoy doing. So I'm happy that I had the chance to do that.
So
why join CCA? So I think I get it, right? You want to impact people's lives, right? You are basically a mediator between the community and the police, right? So one of the things that you mentioned earlier was police shootings. You investigate whether or not there's a fatality or people can walk away from it. Do you investigate situations where just the firearm is discharged?
Yes. So in essence, whenever a firearm is discharged, we send investigators out to the scene and we investigate that case. And what the investigators do is that they do initial monitoring of what's happening. So they just, you know, kind of observe and they walk around with the internal affairs officer to see how the scene is being processed and to sit in on the initial interviews. And then after that process is complete, we will bring the same officers who discharge the firearms back for interviews that we conduct and make sure that we do an independent, thorough examination of what happened. And we also get all the paperwork, all the evidence and do that check to see if everything's on the level or if there's anything off about what happened.
How do you determine success for CCA?
That's a great question. I mean, I think you have to determine success, you know, in a very broad sense. We are here to serve the community, serve the public. And if people walk away feeling as though they've been heard, as though they've been respected, and as though they have had a fair adjudication of their complaint, and if that's how most of our folks feel, then I think that is a success. I say as a companion portion to that, if we are able to make concrete changes that people can point to in their lives that result from the investigation, so not only are you walking away feeling heard and feeling validated, but if we're able to take something from your experience, from your story, from your encounter, and able to have a measurable impact on something that results from a policy standpoint.
Right.
That's another way that I would measure it. If we're able to say, as a result of this, this information that we gather through this process, we're able to make recommendations and able to persuade folks who are in a position to make that happen, that these changes should occur, these adjustments should occur. And at the end of the day, we're going to be able to prevent future complaints from happening because we're able to get these changes, or because we're able to get this accountability from this officer who we did think did something wrong. We're able to figure that out and to make that finding. That accountability is going to happen. That's going to be a deterrent from future misconduct. So I think feeling as though we're able to do that, give people a voice, and also produce some measurable impacts and some measurable changes as a result. I think that's how we have to measure our success. I think there are some ways to quantify that and some ways in which it's going to be intangible. But, I think that's kind of how you have to go into it is these are real people, these are real lives. It's not just about, numbers. It's about someone's story and someone's interaction in someone's life.
Right. You mentioned, you said there's a number of agencies, I don't know if that's the right word, that are investigating along with you all. I mean, the police department, they do their own investigations of these things as well. And are there any others that you kind of work with per se?
Yeah,
like,
so
let's say something happens and you all go out. Who would be there at the scene along with you all?
It really could depend. I mean, in most cases, you're probably talking about the police, and you're going to have, they're going to be, if it's a shooting, there could be homicide investigators there because they're going to see if they're going to charge the officer with a homicide or not.
Right.
There could be, the internal investigation session could be there because even if there's not going to be a homicide charge, they still want to know what happened here. There may be other tactical issues that they may be addressing, or other things that we may be looking at as well. They're not criminal, but that may be issues. There are rare cases where you may have some other agencies involved. I think there are times when we have situations where animals are shot and people are injured, and so there may be animal control, things like that out.
Right.
But typically speaking, I mean, it really is the police department for the most part that's going to be there. I suppose that you could have a case if when I was at the Department of Justice, for instance, we did a lot of work with the FBI. That was our principal. They were our principal investigators, was the FBI agents. We work with them to make our cases. Sometimes they will go out to the scene, although they tend to, in a lot of times, will assess things that have already been done. So they may or may not be dispatched to the scene depending on the incident. But we wouldn't necessarily work with them, but they may be people who are just there and who are present. Gotcha. But we really do, we always, we have a great relationship with internal at CPD, and we have to, a lot of our information is given to us from the police, and we have the ability to request that, and those requests are honored. But we really do at the end of the day work independently. So we are, we don't do joint interviews with police internal. We do our own interviews, and we are making our own assessments about allegations, our own assessments about any number of things that relate to the case. So it really is that that collaboration on the one hand, but also that independence.
And then with that, so let's say an officer has a hearing, they can't really deny the hearing. Is that correct?
When you say hearing,
so like, let's say something happens with the officer and they have representation, and you all have that right to, hey, we want to speak with you all as well, just like whomever else, whether the Hamilton County prosecutor, whoever it is, that our prosecutor also want to speak to them. You all have that right to have that as well. They can't deny you due to based on the
No, absolutely. So that's so the law that allows us to operate states that we're entitled to evidence from the police, and so we're entitled to statements from officers. If an officer is involved in an incident, if an officer is a witness to an incident, we call you to come down and talk to us. You have to come talk to us. It's really a condition of your employment. And
exactly. Gotcha. That's what I was getting at. Thank you.
and because we're not doing a criminal investigation, for instance, an officer cannot plead the fifth. So an officer couldn't say, my answer might incriminate me. I can't answer that. They have to answer the question. Now, as a corollary to that, because they have to answer the question, nothing that they tell us can be used against them in a criminal case.
Gotcha.
In my old line of work when I was a prosecutor, we cannot make anyone talk to us. We have to try to convince them to do that voluntarily. Yeah. But here, if we call you, we try to work out, dates so we can be accommodating of people's schedules, when it makes sense to do that. And in most cases that we can work those things out. But, ultimately people can't say, I refuse to come down and give you a statement.
Right. Gotcha.
Do you all take on any complaint about police, or is there some situations where you would tell someone immediately, like, this won't go anywhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So there are our core allegations that we will investigate, and there are things that we typically do not investigate unless they are accompanied by a core allegation. So I'll just kind of rattle a couple off. So for instance, I mentioned the shootings, discharge of firearm. We will always investigate that. Excessive force, we investigate. Any uses of force that may be excessive or that are questionable. Police stops, car stops or stops, any police detentions that people feel were improper, we will investigate. Any police searches that have occurred, from a pat down frisk to a full blown search of your person, to a search of your car, to a search of your house, we will investigate improper searches. Improper seizures, so police officers seizing evidence, and also making, people probably don't realize oftentimes, but arrests are also seizures. So we do evaluate whether or not there is cause for the arrest in the course of determining the action in our cases. So things like that we investigate, as well as racial profiling, discrimination cases. The things that we will not investigate unless they are accompanied by one of those other charges are things like discourtesy or lack of service, quality of service. So for instance, if somebody's only complaint, I shouldn't say only, like it's like to diminish it, but if someone's saying, this officer, I called them out to the scene because I had an issue and I wanted them to help address the situation. I had a dispute with a neighbor, for instance. So I called into my apartment, and this officer failed to address my neighborly dispute in the way that I wanted them to. And they also were rude to me in the process. That may be discourteous behavior, and it very well may be. It may also be a lack of service, but those two things are not things that CCA will investigate. Those are things that we will refer to CPD. They have a process internally to address those situations. Now, if you say, in the course of when I call them out, they decide to arrest me, and then they mishandle me, then we might be saying, okay, now we're looking at whether or not the arrest was proper, whether the force was proper. And we will also at that point look into the discourtesy and look into the other issues involved. So we do look at discourtesy. We do look at some quality of service issues, and we look at some other procedural issues if they accompany other more serious allegations, to frame it that way. But if it's solely based on discourteous behavior, we will refer that to CPD. And a lot of that too, it's partially a resource issue, because we want to make sure we are equipped to handle the cases that you're talking about, people's sort of life and liberty, and that we have the resources to be able to do that.
Exactly.
And so we have to prioritize and there's a process to handle other types of complaints. There may be a time in the future where we're able to have a different process to handle some of the quality concerns. Maybe there's a mediation process that we can help set up to address some of those things that could either work alongside or could replace CPDs. Those things should be discussed for the future, but right now we currently do not investigate lack of service or discourtesy if those are the only things.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think that's great information to be able to share out. And another question. So in 2015 we had the murder of Sam DuBose, right? Ray Tenzing. He's a University of Cincinnati police officer. So my question to you is, would CAA have been able, because I know immediately when the scene happened, there were Cincinnati police officers dispatched, and it was kind of a big thing. Would CCA, would you all be able to investigate University of Cincinnati Police or Xavier Police or any police department within the city of Cincinnati? That you get what I mean? So university police officers, I should say.
Yeah, so I think I'll just start by saying that I'm going to talk generally speaking. I'm not going to address any specific case.
Of course.
And it's, in part because I was at DOJ when certain cases,
Of course.
So, but as it relates to whether or not we would investigate other agencies, I'm not aware of a time in the past when we have done that, and I don't know that we would have the authority under our statute to do that.
Gotcha.
I think it's an interesting question. Certainly, if those actors are acting along with Cincinnati Police Department, what they're doing might be relevant to our investigation. So we still may want to take statements from them. We still may want to examine their conduct in the course of understanding what CPD officers did.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and certainly I'm not aware of a time in the past when we've said, what University of Cincinnati Police did, was or was not, we are going to sustain some allegation against them. I just don't know that we really have that authority. But it's an interesting question. That's why I don't want to completely, because I'd have to probably talk to our law department to get some additional guidance on what is theoretically possible. But I'm not aware of us doing that.
Gotcha. And I appreciate you, answering that to the best. I was just kind of curious, and you have situations like that happen,
Sure.
where college police are patrolling the same areas as the city police, and I'm just kind of curious as to I know you all exclusively working with Cincinnati Police Department, but just kind of weren't just curious about a situation where something like that may have occurred. Like for instance, a case I can speak about. I remember the Lorenzo Collins situation back in the late '90s. Where in that situation you had Cincinnati Police Department and you had the University of Cincinnati Police Department both take action against Mr. Collins, resulting in his death. And I mean, in that situation, if the CCA was around at that time, I'm sure you would have been able to investigate that case. And I would probably a bit different to get the University of Cincinnati Police Department to come in and speak with you, but obviously your officers, you would have been able to obviously as a condition of employment be able.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, we always have because our investigations can be quite broad in terms of information that we're gathering. There's nothing limiting us in our reports from talking about what we have uncovered from interviewing other officers. So I think we'd always be able to say, hey, we talked to this other officer from this other police department, and I don't think there's anything from stopping us from being able to say, hey, that was an inappropriate action from that officer. I think the question might be, could we issue a finding that would have some sort of implication for that officer's employment? Because at the end of the day, all of our findings get presented to Cincinnati city manager. Exactly. And so if the city manager had authority over that police agency, then I would think that maybe there's an ability for us to be a bigger player in what's happening there. But if the manager lacks authority over that other police agency, then my thinking is that we probably would not be able to issue any finding on it, even if we could talk about it in our investigation.
Okay. Thank you.
What I want to know is, as a community member, how would I come to you all? How would I find your information? If I'm unaware, what is the reach out or the outreach, right? That CCA does to let people know that we are here. We're here to help, and these are the things that we do.
Absolutely. So, we've done a good job in the past, and there's always room for improvement, but we've done a good job of getting out, certainly before COVID, and trying to get out to the schools, the community councils, to really talk about what we do, who we are, and that we are here to hear complaints. We're a resource for folks here in the city. And so we really are going to, in 2021, try to lean into that a little bit more as much as we can and do some things virtually and to really get the word out that we're here. I'm always surprised at people who think that we're either a brand new organization, think that this is our kind of first year in existence, or have never heard of us at all. And so we clearly do have some work to do in terms of reaching folks. And a lot of that's going to have to be through social media, through events like this, through the community councils, using CCA's board meetings as opportunities to engage people, as we've tried to do. We have a monthly board meeting that occurs, and typically occurs down at City Hall. We've taken those virtual to try to reach new people during this pandemic age. And so part of it's going to be advertising that to people and inviting people to tune into those meetings, to speak during the public comment portion, to become engaged about our work, and using that as one tool to reach more people and to hopefully inform them about the ways in which they can bring a complaint to our attention. And then it really is, once we're able to get more out in the community more physically, it really is hitting the pavement a little bit, going to as many events as possible. And that's stuff that I enjoyed doing the most when I was a candidate, really is just going around to events, talking to people, telling our story repeatedly. We got a pretty good PowerPoint presentation that we can give to folks as well. We've done that in the past. But, we got to do things like that to really make people aware of how they can get in contact with us and really what we do. And, I think it's at the end of the day, like I said, you may not always like our conclusions, but we're going to take you very seriously. We're going to give you a voice in the process. And, it's at the end of the day, you might be surprised what we're able to uncover about what happened in your case. There are times when you may not even be aware of an action that might have been improper or that might need some addressing, whereas we might catch something. So, there are ways in which I think the community is well served, even if they're not always happy with everything that we do. It's just a matter of telling that story and getting the message out.
I'm extremely excited to hear you say, hitting the pavement, because I think, grassroots is an art that is lost amongst a lot of people. And I think some of the people who may need you the most, aren't attending community council meetings or those type of avenues or outlets, to reach you also. That's extremely exciting to hear. Two questions I got, So I know that you all may be limited on staff, because you have the investigators tied up. So one is, how would you all, what does hitting the pavement look like? And two, do you all take volunteers to actually get your message out? Is there an organization or, is there an organization as far as that is concerned?
Yeah, so, we absolutely, are in need of some extra help when it comes to getting that message out. And I think we really want to roll out in 2021 a program that really does engage volunteers more holistically. So maybe it might look like a sort of like a CCA ambassador type program where we essentially will train you on what we do, who we are, what our processes are, and then equip you to go out in the community and to present the PowerPoint presentation, to talk about how CCA has impacted you if you have that experience, or to just share something that can reach people and can tie into what we do here and go to some places where we have not previously gone before. And so we definitely want to engage volunteers in doing some of that hard work, because you mentioned it earlier, I think in the first part of your question, we have investigators, but those folks are often tied up doing the cases, interviewing the officers, writing up the reports, analyzing all the evidence. And that is their core job. And some of them do have a community-oriented focus or passion, but they also are limited in terms of their capacity. So it really is about building greater capacity by engaging volunteers, and also hopefully in the future maybe even seeking out some new funding to be able to bring somebody on to do some of that work and to organize that a little bit more holistically. Because again, people, this is a service we provide for the people here in the city, and people ought to be using it. People ought to have an outlet for their frustration, for their complaints, for their situations that will result in them having a voice, but also might result in some accountability at the end of the day. So we ought to be eager to reach more people and to have the resources to be able to do that. So we welcome volunteers, and if folks are interested in doing that, definitely, I want to make sure they have our website, have our phone number, so we can have that discussion and begin to plug you into that vision that we have in 2021 of really being able to do some more enhanced community outreach.
Yeah.
And also, people have ideas we haven't even thought of yet. So it's about engaging people in that process as well, to say, hey, what ideas do you have for how we can reach people, and what fresh approaches can we be adopting that we have not adopted in the past?
Yeah,
I would definitely say keep Mo and I in mind when it comes to being an ambassador, because I think the work that you all are doing is much needed, right? Yeah. And I do think that I can think of people who may not know of you, myself, right? Myself, and I feel like I'm a decently informed citizen. So I definitely think that you all, there should be some more awareness about CCA, and I definitely would love to help with that.
Yeah. But as far as with the ambassador program, I would love to speak with you more offline, and hopefully get some folks involved, and hey, maybe even if it's learning the PowerPoint and presenting it the way it takes them off your staff, and we can maybe go to community councils and present this stuff. I think that's a great thing, and I know there may be interested, college students and things like that who may be interested in doing some things like that. So yeah, please keep us in mind, as JeRod stated.
For sure.
JeRod, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're perfectly fine. I think another question that I wanted to ask you, right? You spoke a lot about how you all collaborate with Cincinnati police, and maybe I missed it. Like, what are some of the things that the Cincinnati police are doing or can do, right, to develop a better relationship with the community, according to you all's recommendations?
Yeah, so, that's a great question. I think a lot of our recommendations have I don't know if they have quite as much in the past have touched on things that the police can do to better engage the community. I think that's one area that we probably ought to be looking at to make some recommendations in that area. But just off the top of my head, I mean, I think that, there are a lot of things that the police are doing that we become aware of through the course of our investigations that I don't know that people are always aware of. And a lot of these things are good things that they ought to really be talking about that really are going to help them. So, for instance,
that should be talked about, to your point too. That should be talked about.
Yeah, that I think need to be talked about more. I think people need to have an understanding of what's happening. So, for two reasons. Number one, because I think that a lot of these things are positive and they ought to be getting some credit for it and building some trust for it. But also, I think if there's an opportunity to kind of have some back and forth, some Q&A with some of that outreach, it might help to kind of sharpen what they're doing as well and make it even more effective. So, they may tell me that they're already doing some of these things. So but when it comes to, for instance, de-escalation training, I noticed from what we have observed with them that they are doing a lot and have an increased focus on de-escalation training and techniques and really teaching self-awareness to officers as being a big component of that.
Yeah.
And try and emphasize that as a way to avoid escalating situations involving use of force. And I think they ought to be talking more about that stuff and be bringing more of that to the community, saying, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's how we're training our officers. What ideas do you have? But I think that is one area where I think there could be some increased outreach, some increased discussion with some more specificity about, hey, here's what we're doing to address some of these concerns that folks have about use of force. So I think they ought to be talking about their de-escalation for sure. And also, how they respond to critical incidents, how they respond to mental health incidents, things like that.
Yeah.
I think that they have some approaches that folks may not always be aware of that might be in line with what people want to see. And it doesn't always go perfectly, but at least I think that there's the will to make that effort, and they ought to be talking about that a little bit more, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you. And speaking of the Cincinnati Police Department, I know that they've recently renewed their contract with the city, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then one of the things that I read was that they have eliminated peer reviews. If you could tell a little bit about what I'm speaking about when I say peer reviews, and just some of your personal thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that I think the city got a deal that is a good deal for accountability. Of course, not everyone gets everything that they want in any negotiation, but I think that eliminating peer review was a much needed step toward greater accountability. As it existed previously, peer review allowed someone who was just that, was a peer to the officer who's being disciplined, to weigh in and to reverse certain disciplinary corrective actions. And that really, at the end of the day, you have someone who, we all carry certain biases with us. And if this is somebody who, whose shoes you feel like you walked in, or you know that person, or you're familiar with those situations, you may be much more lenient than someone who's looking at it from an accountability and deterrence standpoint. Whereas the command's looking at it from the standpoint of, how can I deter future bad behavior? How can I ensure accountability and public trust? The peers aren't always seeing it that way. And so I think getting rid of peer review allows for the discipline that's being imposed by the chief, by the commanders, to actually stick. And at the end of the day, that also, frankly, increases our ability to do our work and our influence over that process, because what we do is always designed to support and to supply the city manager, the police, with the information that they need to hopefully take accountability steps that are going to be helpful. So if at the end of the day, if we sustain somebody for an improper search or for use of force that is excessive, and if the police discipline that person for that, if that gets overturned by a peer, then the whole accountability structure from CCA on upward is weakened. So I think the peer review was a good step, just getting rid of that. I think going to the arbitration model, which has the 3 arbitrators as opposed to the 1 arbitrator, so that there's less inability for folks to kind of pick and choose who ultimately is going to be arbitrating their dispute.
Are they independent arbitrators, or are they employees of? How are the arbitrators selected?
No, so my understanding is that they're arbitrators that you through the American Arbitration Association.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they don't work for the city, as far as I understand. And I'm not terribly involved with that process, but they're arbitrators that in the past, both sides have had some input in picking the person, but because they're only picking one arbitrator in the past, there's a greater ability for the person who's contesting the discipline, the officer in that case, to ultimately shape who's getting it, and that arbitrator may be more, is a greater chance of getting a biased arbitrator if there's just the one person as opposed to having the three panel and having this be neutral. So that's going to be a good step. We have seen there's a case I'm looking at right now. We're still looking at it, so I'm not going to talk specifics, but it's a case that involved an arbitration decision that overturned discipline that the chief had imposed. And so that's the kind of situation again where if you'd had that three panel of arbitrators as opposed to just the one, I think there's a greater chance for that discipline to stick as opposed to the one. It's much easier to kind of manipulate that outcome and to really erode discipline. So I think the deal was a good one for accountability, a good one overall, and certainly anxious to see how it all plays out in the future.
So the chief of police, right?
Yes.
Imposed discipline, and I'm assuming that whom he imposed the discipline on went to appeal, and it got overturned. And the arbitrator can overturn even the chief's discipline.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So in this particular case, and I think how it works as a matter of the contracts and the arbitrator's authority is that once there is an internal decision that's made, if internal investigation says we think this person messed up, we're sustaining them on this, we are recommending discipline, or at least we're going to sustain this allegation. It then goes, and it can go to an internal hearing process that takes place. Once that hearing concludes, the hearing officer can recommend discipline, and then the chief can say, yes, I'm going to accept that recommendation. I'm imposing this discipline. The chief has to consult with the city manager. The city manager has to ultimately, and the city attorney, they have to all agree on these things. But at the end of the day, once the chief, city manager, impose that discipline and make that determination, that can be challenged through the arbitration process, and the arbitrator can overturn that. And so that it certainly can weaken that. And in this case that I have in mind, discipline was definitely affected by that decision and what was weakened. And that's something where, again, our goal is oftentimes like we're pushing to see what we can do, especially I'm talking about sustained findings. There are many findings where we clear officers, but where we find an officer messed up, especially if it's egregious or if it's been a pattern, our hope is that there's going to be some accountability and some corrective action and perhaps even some disciplinary action at the end of the day. If we can get to the point where we can get the city manager and police to agree with that position, that's a huge victory. To have that reversed by an arbitrator, to me, it makes our job just that much harder. So, at the end of the day, again, I think all these reforms are great for accountability. I think they're good for CCA in the long run. And I'm excited to see how all this plays out in the future. But I think at least we're heading in a good direction as it relates to those outcomes.
And not just the CCA, to our citizens of the city of Cincinnati as well. I mean, to know that we have a process that works in a fashion that promotes accountability, I think is great. I mean, like you speak of some of the things that the police department are doing, de-escalation and things. I think a lot of that can be, we can root some of that stuff coming up from, the 2001, 2002 when you all were created and these processes were put in place. I mean, there are many, cities and things that love the work that we're doing here in Cincinnati around, our processes and things of that nature. And that all came from, the 2001 situation. And, I'm that's why, one of the reasons I was like, hey, we got to have Gabe on and talk about CCA because I know you all do some great work, and to hear that you all are, being refunded and able to get the proper number of investigators and such is just a great thing to hear. So
there are certain people in the community. I think of you. I think of Eddie Cohen with the Urban League, man, who need bigger platforms. It's just it bothers me, right, to no end that people who are doing public service work, right, and impactful public service work that impact the citizens and the people who need impact the most, right, do not have bigger platforms. So I'm definitely a fan of yours. I'm gonna sing your praises until my lungs right out. Yeah. So I definitely, and I feel like I could speak for Mo in this regard as well. I definitely want to help people become more aware of this, because I feel like there's so much work, and you grew up in a public service household. Yep. So I feel like you had more access to it, right, growing up. And I don't think citizens in lower income areas have that same access or that same awareness. And I do feel like one of the things that was recurring in your speech was voice, so that people feel like they're being heard, they have a voice, even if we're unable to give them the results. So I feel like you get it, right? I feel like you get it, and that's super important. So I appreciate that. I do want to, and I'm going to give you an out on this last question, right? I'm going to give you an out. This is the last question that I want to talk about in regards to business, because it's a polarizing topic. So feel free to say no comment.
Please,
defunding the police, right? Defunding the police. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you stand?
Yeah, I think, certainly I having grown up in a law enforcement household, I certainly have seen the great value that I think that good policing can bring to the community.
Of course.
So I'm not someone who thinks that we need to abolish the police. I'm not someone who thinks that we don't need police. I think police do have a role to play. And I think I've been a prosecutor in my career as well, so I've seen some of the what I would call some of the darker sides of humanity. So I think we do need people to protect and serve in that way. And sometimes, in my opinion, that means some people are going to go to jail. Some people are going to be held accountable.
Of course.
And I'm not someone who has believed that we need to just do away with all those things. Although I certainly recognize that there is a history behind some of these things that is deeply troubling, and there's a history even behind policing itself that we can discuss that there should be some greater awareness and accountability and sensitivity to. But I do think that. I think we are most successful at talking about where we can reimagine certain aspects of policing, where we can repurpose certain portions of that vision, and ensure greater collaboration between police and other agencies and other service providers to ensure that communities are getting what they need, and that de-escalation is happening, but that people are also being met. And that we're not just putting band-aids, that we're actually addressing root causes. And I think,
for instance, and to give it, like, for instance, the police having a collaboration with, the county, where if there's a situation where they suspect someone's having a mental health episode, being able to contact maybe a social worker or someone to help them deal with that. Those I think those are some of the things you're speaking about. Correct?
That's right. Yeah, that absolutely. I think the truth is that the police are often called upon to respond to family crises, mental health issues, a whole variety of things that are better addressed by other providers. And I don't know that means we have to have a discussion about, we need to just, slash X% from the police. I think the point is not to start with a number and say, hey, let's just make a cut. Right. I think the point is to have a more holistic discussion about what kind of society do we want? What is the best use of our time, our efforts, our resources? And what is the best role for the police to play in ensuring that delivery of services happens in the way that people can be satisfied with? So I guess I'm less less interested in really either side of the debate as it relates to whether or not we are trying to take away money, or I think it's a deeper discussion about how do we envision citizens interacting with those who are tasked with enforcing the law. Yep. And what does that look like, and how can we ensure that there's that appropriate optimal balance?
Yep.
And so that's it's a hard discussion. It's not an easy discussion, and it touches on lots of different issues. But that's kind of how I've always tried to approach it.
You said it so eloquently. I appreciate that, because I actually completely agree with you. It shouldn't be based on a number. Hey, defund the police. To me, that sounds like, whoa. It doesn't.
What if I say, though, Mo? What if I say let's reallocate funds? Are you still as apprehensive about it? If I say let's reallocate funds,
I'm not. Because to Gabe's point, I think that the deeper discussion. Okay, what is the society we want? How can we get there? And I don't think you should start with, hey, let's cut 50% of their budget. No, I don't think you should do that. No, not at all.
Okay. Just interested. Gabe, we got 7 minutes left. So what I want to do within these last 7 minutes is I want to dig deep in personality. So I want to know, what are you listening to? What shows are you watching, and what books are you reading?
Yes. Oh man, these are all excellent questions.
The toughest questions, right?
So I've been in this mood. So what I'm listening to during the pandemic, where I think I need more just like sort of like calming music, just sort of like. Mm-hmm. So I've always been a huge like jazz fan, but I think I've gotten like a little bit deeper into it. So I've been going through. I have like an Apple Music subscription, so I can stream all this stuff for free. So I've been streaming a lot of just like Wynton Marsalis.
Wynton Marsalis, yes.
Older stuff. Gil Scott Heron.
Ooh.
Yeah. So like that kind of. So I feel like that's kind of, those things are kind of, those have been on my playlist lately pretty heavily. Also just some of the newer, it's not really new, I guess, but like Anderson .Paak's last couple of albums, I'm always kind of a big fan of his. So those things are on my playlist. When it comes to what I'm watching, I've been watching a lot of stuff. So this past summer, my wife and I were really into Lovecraft Country.
Lovecraft Country, okay.
We were watching it pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Of course, that's off the air right now. So we were last week we were watching the on Netflix the Shonda Rhimes. What's that show?
Bridgerton.
Yes. Yeah. So
I need to let me write that down.
If you're into that kind of stuff, I mean it's a good show. It's entertaining. We were watching it last week. We see something to kind of binge on. What else am I watching right now? I'm a huge TV buff, so I would just if I had the time. It's harder now. I'm raising a 2-year-old, so she kind of takes a lot of our time and energy.
Yeah.
But when I can,
I'm probably got to ask what she's watching, because that's probably what you all are watching as well.
Hey,
so
exactly.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Shonda Rhimes, she had another one on Netflix with Chadwick Boseman. I think it's Ma Rainey's. I can't think of it, but it was really good. It was a play previously. Maybe Ma Rainey's Blues. I'm not sure, but if you could check that out, I watched that. That was really, really good. That was really interesting.
Yes, so we actually did watch that when that came out. The
nice.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, was that? Yeah. So yeah,
that's exactly it.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is what we're into. There's also a new one that's on Amazon right now. I think Regina King, she directed it. It's about like Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Jim Brown, and Sam Cooke. I think they had like a meeting. It's back in the 60s, right before a boxing match, something like that, and then they all kind of merged with a greater commitment to civil rights. And there's a good movie on Amazon. Just came out, I think, last night that I'm going to check out later. But I'm a big fan of history too, so I love history, so I'm all about that kind of stuff. So I'll probably check that out. In terms of what I'm reading, I will always I start books and I put them down. So I need to just like commit and just get through some things. Mm-hmm. But I have my nightstand right now. Sort of 2 books. I'm reading Cast by Isabel. I think her last name is either Wilkerson or Wilkinson.
Cast.
Yeah, Cast. And so it's sort of about the history of race in America. And she likens it to the caste system in India and kind of explores lots of different cultures and how they have created stratification systems throughout history. Yeah. So that's a great book. And then also, again, I'm a huge history fan. The Splendid and the Vile. It's kind of like World War II. The Nazis were invading and dropping bombs on England. So I've kind of been starting to stop on that one as well. But those are the 2 that I'm most into right now. But that's kind of what I've been spending some of my free time on during this COVID-19 season.
Nice. Thank you.
The Color of Money is as far as history is concerned, The Color of Money, I find that to be a really, really interesting book as well. Have you had a chance to tap into that?
I've not. I've heard of that, but I've not read it yet. It definitely needs to go on my list.
Yeah, definitely. In regards to speaking to the banking systems and the inequality in regards to that. You know what? I appreciate your time. Yep. I appreciate some of the knowledge that you've given us. It's been invaluable. As I said before, man, just let us know what we can do to support, to let more people know about the Citizens Complaint Agency so we can actually get people out there, so we can let people know that they have a voice, they can be heard, we can hold police accountable, or at the very least, we can let them know what they can do to try to prevent these situations moving forward. So whatever we can do, let us know, Gabe.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. I'm happy to continue it and to come back and hopefully to collaborate some more on some things in the future. So
certainly, and we'll have a link and things where we can share this out as well. And we appreciate the I know you posted it in the on your website and the city website, so appreciate and sharing it out in various different places. So I know a lot of people, obviously it is Friday night, so I get it. But we definitely will share it and let people tune in on the discussion.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so. Gabe, thank you again. We'll certainly be in touch. JeRod, your video went away, but
yeah, I tried to come back, but it told me that the host was preventing me because I just felt like he was hating on me. So I
probably was, and I apologize. Because we got some people on we got some we got some people on the line, and I didn't want videos, other people's videos popping up because this isn't exactly a webinar.
Absolutely, I understand.
But Gabe, hey, thank you so much, and be looking out for us in the next couple of weeks. So we got somebody special cooking. JeRod, we're going to make some discussions. We'll make an announcement, and we'll go from there. So thank you. You've been great, and look forward to sharing this out.
All right, guys, take care.
Hey, thank you. Y'all have a great one.
Be safe.
Thank you.